Pricketts Fort was built here, of course, American Indian nations hunted in the region and came to war through here and went on peace missions through here along the Monongahela River. There was a major Indian passageway through here. Most of the Indian nations that utilized this area were the Delaware, Shawnees, Mingos, Wyandots, and they were involved in a number of different wars, but also just daily living. This was a rich land. The soil here is good and fertile, and when they needed to establish a crop, they would burn a piece of wood, and then as the trees would die and the branches fall off, they would gather the branches, and that was their firewood. And so they hated to lose this land. When the Europeans began moving in, there were wars to try to prevent the Europeans from taking over. The Delawares would call it a wigwam. The Shawnees would call it a wiki-wa or wiki-up. And typically they were made with saplings tied together, stuck in the ground and tied together into a dome shape, sometimes an A-frame shape, but typically a dome shape, and then covered with bark. Around here they used the bark of the linicbe or the linden tree, also known as the basswood tree. That was real common to use. They also used elm bark from American elm trees and slippery elm trees. And so it was natural materials, and this would be about the size of a small family group, or maybe a hunting lodge for the winter time of a small family group. And it's a pretty daggone good replica of it. The smoke hole's covered up right now, but we certainly want to open the smoke hole before we set a fire in there. And basically they had central heat. Had a fire in the center of the wigwam, and everybody could sleep with their feet or their heads towards the fire and stay warm that way. These are actually warmer than your log cabin with a fireplace on one end of the house. The region, as I said, at one point was a great place for hunting for those native peoples that hunted here, and it was full of wildlife. There were elk, there were bear, occasionally buffalo, a lot of small game. There were wolves, predatory animals like wolves and mountain lions in the region, but there were a lot of white-tailed deer before the skin trade became prominent in the area. White-tailed deer probably supplied more meat and clothing and material for making tools to the American Indians before European contact than any other single animal. Of course, there were beavers in the rivers and streams like Pricketts Creek and the Monongahela River here. There were muskrats and other fur bearers that provided a good opportunity for trade in skins with the Europeans who desired those skins. And of course, the American Indians got in exchange metal goods, knives, tomahawks, pots, kettles, blankets of various sorts, clothing, and cloth, linen, needle and thread, many things that were useful to them. Eventually guns, they could trade for guns as well, which made their lives simpler when they were hunting the larger game, like the elk and the buffalo. So very abundant with game in this region, even in prehistoric times.